Well, thank you very much for the opportunity of being here and the lovely introduction. When you put a microphone in front of a retired general who's an apprentice politician, you're in for a long haul. However, I will attempt at something that's not known to generals, and that is brevity. So we'll try to keep it concise and then leave some time for questions. So as I'm going down there, give me a sign. Don't use your hand. Throw something at me, because if you use your hand, I'll just think you're saluting, and I'll take it for granted. A number of you are here from the English second language. I am very simpatico with you, because English second language is exactly what I'm speaking today, is my second language. My first language is Québécois, or as some of my friends in France say, 18th century French. When English is your second language, it gives you certain privileges within an Anglo environment, particularly here in North America and specifically in Canada, because we do recognize both the Oxford and the Webster pronunciations and spelling. So you can get away with nearly murder in your use of the language. And so I tend to say that I speak a North American English. In that, when I learned the language as a young boy, I learned it at a Cub Scout sort of group, young Cubs. Remember Baden-Powell and Cubs and Scouting movement. And it was in a basement of an English Protestant school in East End, Montreal, which was predominantly French-Canadian Catholic. So my mother on Tuesday nights would send me to the Cub Pack, this Catholic French-Canadian boy in this English Protestant school, and on Wednesday mornings I go to confession. I then learned the language by total immersion, and it started by a bit of a literary fashion, and that was due to the sixer of my little organization, who wanted me to say something if the leaders of the pack would ask me a question, because I spoke only French. And so they taught me this little rhyme that I would say that is not too offensive, but it goes something like this. When you're out with your honey and your nose is a runny, don't think it's funny, because it's not. Now, some of you pick up on that very fast. Other are still working on it. It took me 1.5 years to figure it out. So I'm very simpatico with you, and I will not do as I tend to do, where my Marine Corps friends taught me to do power talking. I will try to be reasonably succinct in my points. I'm here at the forum because we were discussing human rights. And although I considered Winnipeg as the core of human rights discussion in our country, I am more and more impressed at how Calgary in particular has become attentive and engaged in that subject, which is a bit contrary to the Eastern Canada's perception of what Alberta is. And we won't go too far into that. However, all the more kudos to this institution, Bow Valley, for the forum, for its interest, and for the extraordinary diversity of its student body, where other universities are struggling and institutions struggling to have foreign students, to bring a emancipation of their student body by having foreign students with their, this institution seems to be well on its way of recognizing that it is through the exchange in a milieu of certain academic rigor that you will have between the cultures, the language, the social backgrounds, and the values and experiences gain this sense of humanity. For, ladies and gentlemen, borders are but a very temporary institution. Nation states are going to be éphémère more than we ever perceived. Nationalism will be a tool of the past. Sovereignty will no more be an absolute to permit people to massively abuse the human rights of their own people by hiding behind those international barriers. And what's going to break that down in a sort of attrition fashion, not in some massive explosion as a sort of a nuclear blast, but as we attrit these instruments that separate human beings from each other, that create the frictions of our differences. And although useful tools in their times are being less so because of globalization, because of the revolutions that are ongoing, revolutions like the environment. The environment doesn't start and stop in your kitchen. The environment is world. It's the globe. The environment is how humanity will thrive into the future, not survive the future. And so the environment has no borders. It's limitless. And so humanity is seeking to access to that limitless resource, seemingly, and protect it, and to use it in order for future generations to thrive. And so, all the more so, do we see the need to bring in world policies, global policies, and hold us accountable to global institutions on bringing in the revolution of the environment and how humanity must communion with it and not use it and abuse it. So that's one revolution that's breaking down barriers. Another one is the information revolution. And this is the more recent, but is the one that we do not master, yet it has the potential to significantly shift the whole of humanity. One day you will be able to Skype the world. You can still today, if you were in a high school somewhere and you got a small project together and chose a school anywhere in the world and you sent them and helped them install a computer, a sort of solar panels, and a satellite link, you could Skype those kids in those schools, those youth. You can actually see that you in your high school, you in your institution, and you can talk to them right in theirs, and you can see that the blackboard there is a blackboard because it's black paint, not even a board, on a wall. And they're using chalk. And you can see what the complexities is for them to be able to acquire education, to acquire the intellectual rigor essential to be able to comprehend the complex problems of our times and to be able to bring in a leadership role solutions. And so the whole realm of communications is an instrument to advance what I believe are some of the components of the advancement of humanity. Yes, human rights. Yes, international organization like the International Criminal Court that fights impunity through the Rome Statute. Yes, international conventions like child rights and the optional protocol on child rights that says you don't use people under 18 for fighting for wars and training and so on like that. Those are all sort of instruments that are absolutely essential for the evolution of humanity. So you've got that dimension. But you've also got the whole realm of the NGO world, which is maximizing more and more this communications revolution. The world in the future, humanity in the future, is far more, in my opinion, in the hands of the coalescing of the NGO community than in the nation states. The NGOs will influence public opinion and policies in the future. And a recent example is that I squired through the Senate a bill, C-43. And the bill essentially said the government is to focus CIDA, our international development, on fighting poverty. And there's a whole raft of means of doing that. It wanted it to focus on fighting poverty. The idea came from a coalition of NGOs, of about 120 NGOs across this country, who coalesced, funded together an office, and lobbied and harassed and harangued and influenced and helped write the legislation that ultimately was approved and is there for implementation by the government to give direction to our international development. That's just a small influence of the International Forum and of the NGO community and what it can do. So we are in this era that revolutions are possible. We are in an era where we can continue to advance humanity through these communications tools by advancing education. Education, education, education. To comprehend the problems and to articulate the solutions. And I represented the Minister Asida at the Organization of American States conference that was held in Quebec City a few years back. And there was a parallel conference on the youth of those countries in what they were going for. And for the whole week they debated. And they were the example of youth participation in the future, because their future is right in their face. It's not 20 years down the road, it's 5 years down the road with the advancement of technology and changes and so on. And so the youth had a series of recommendations. The first recommendation, by far ahead of all the others, was education. Give us the tools to understand and to articulate the solutions. One that is going to be greatly assisted by this communications revolution. The second one is the empowerment of women. In this world, male-dominant societies are not flexible, nor do they have the innovative enough ideas to shift significantly their cultural, political, social structures in order to ultimately prevent the frictions of our differences reverting to conflict. Women whose voices are unheard can change that. They have that yet untapped flexibility and sense of humanity, and they can attrit this male dominance and ultimately bring a whole new set of parameters to the debate. Empowerment of women is absolutely crucial to the advancement of humanity in a way that doesn't revert to conflict, that in fact prevents conflict being the solution to the frictions of the differences that exist in people. The third element is one that we fiddle with, and that is we have articulated over the years policies on tolerance. And there was a great sort of harouche of how this was to be an instrument of reconciliation, an instrument of bringing in with respect the various cultural references of our nations, and in so doing permit everyone to thrive. Thrive without having been sort of molded into one shape, thrive within some general parameters in which they can still flourish and they can still, in fact, respect their backgrounds. Well, I would say that tolerance is passé. It's an old tool. Who am I to tolerate someone else's differences? We have, slowly, but I see more and more, through the advancement of human rights and respect of human rights, we are moving to respect. Respect means equal. And the question that is yet to be resolved is, are all humans human? Are all humans equal? Or are some humans more human than others? Are some humans, in their structures, with their backgrounds, perceive themselves to be more human, perceive themselves to be more significant as a human being than another human being? And the example I used earlier on of this little boy in Rwanda caught up in the war, who was abandoned and bloated with stomach and sick and dirty and mangy and so on. And I looked at that little 5-year-old, 6-year-old boy in the middle of that genocide where they're slaughtering left, right, and center. The war is raging. And I looked at him and I looked into his eyes. And what I saw in the eyes of that little boy was exactly what I saw in the eyes of my 6-year-old son back home. They were the eyes of a human child, and they were exactly the same. That little boy, in those circumstances, was just as human, just as much an entity of humanity as my son back home. My son thrives and works his way through these complex societies of ours. What happened to that little boy? Why did humanity abandon him in the hundreds of thousands? And so, this is not to be a downer. This is not to be a lesson in how to turn into a pessimist and ultimately even to become cynical. Heaven forbid. Cynicism is the bane of humanity. It's an abdication of your responsibility to humanity. This is a session on optimism because there's a solution. There has to be, because the problem is human. So if the problem is human, that means human beings can solve it. And so how do we solve it? We solve it, ladies and gentlemen, by the advancement of human rights, by our ethical standards of human rights, not only within our borders, but beyond our borders, and that we remain ethical and morally responsible to protect and to assist where human rights are being massively abused. And that means not only in throwing cash at it, it means in sweat, it means in tears, and it means sometimes in the blood of the youth of our nation to advance it. And we will achieve our aim. For I believe in ending that ultimately human beings seek not the frictions of the competition between each other, the sort of Darwinian concept of humanity. I believe that humanity seeks serenity. Even the most evil seek serenity for their own. And so we will one day resolve the frictions of our differences, not by conflict, but by, in fact, human rights, by intellectually rigorous debate, by empowerment of all human beings. And so one day there will not be any more conflicts and massive abuses. Might take a couple centuries, so what? If we can sort this out in the next 2 centuries by the continued advancement of human rights and that movement, by the increasing power of the NGO community, by the maximizing of these communications revolutions and technology revolutions that the younger generation are mastering and ready to do, then hey, what's 2 centuries for the rest of humanity? Thank you very much.